Please, Min-jun, please have mercy.
We'll do anything you ask.
It is believed that some men own cities, some men own empires. But there once lived a man who owned both. A man whose name alone could silence a crowded room. A man who controlled half of Seoul's underground with an iron fist. He decided who lived, who died, and who prospered. His name was Kang Min-jun. Everyone in Seoul knew Kang Min-jun, the most feared mafia king in all of Korea. A man who bowed to no one. A man who feared nothing and nobody. He'd built his empire on blood and steel, and he wore his reputation like armor. But on this particular night, just one envelope was about to bring this untouchable king to his knees. It was a beautiful morning in Seoul, the kind of morning where the sun painted the city gold and the air smelled clean and new. Min-jun was in his penthouse, getting ready for another day of ruling his kingdom. Black suit laid out perfectly, expensive watch already on his wrist, hair styled back with precision, everything in its place, everything under control. That's when the knock came. "Come in," he called out, his voice carrying that natural authority that made even his most loyal men straighten their spines. The door opened and one of his guards entered, holding a white envelope. The man looked uncomfortable, nervous even, and Min-jun's men were never nervous. "Boss," the guard said carefully, "you have a message." Min-jun didn't look up from adjusting his cufflinks. "From who?" There's no sender's name on it, boss." Now that got his attention. Min-jun turned slowly, his dark eyes fixing on the envelope. In his world, anonymous messages meant two things. Either someone was declaring war, or someone was already dead. Without hesitation, he walked over and took the envelope from his guard's hand. The man practically fled the room after handing it over, and Min-jun didn't blame him. Whatever this was, it had the stench of trouble all over it. He opened it with steady fingers. Calm, collected. Nothing rattled Kang Min-jun. Until now. Inside was a single document, a DNA paternity test. His eyes scanned the page, not really believing what he was seeing. There, in black and white, in official medical language that couldn't be disputed, were the words that stopped his heart. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. For a moment, everything went silent. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. His mind went blank, then raced, then blank again. "How is this possible?" he whispered to himself, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. He looked again at the document, searching for some explanation, some mistake. But there was no mistake. 2 children, not 1. 2. Twins. 5-year-old twins. His twins. The DNA results showed matches for 2 separate children, both carrying his genetic markers. Both undeniably his. His first thought was that it had to be a fabrication. Someone trying to manipulate him. Blackmail, perhaps. Or a sick joke from his enemies. But then his eyes caught the letterhead at the top of the page. Seoul, National University Hospital, the most renowned, most respected medical facility in all of South Korea. They didn't make mistakes. They didn't participate in frauds. Their reputation was spotless. This was real. "No." The word escaped his lips like a prayer. Then louder. "No." His voice rose, echoing off the expensive walls of his penthouse. "This is not possible." But even as he said it, even as he denied it, the truth was staring him in the face. The paper slipped from his trembling fingers and fluttered to the marble floor like a wounded bird. His hands were shaking. Kang Min-jun's hands never shook. In all his years of violence, of building an empire on the backs of his enemies, of making impossible decisions and living with the consequences, his hands had never once trembled. But they were shaking now, like leaves in a storm, like his entire world was falling apart. Because it was. Kang Min-jun had spent 5 long years convinced that his ex-wife, Yuri, had left Seoul with nothing. He'd spent 5 years carrying the crushing weight of guilt, telling himself he'd done the right thing by pushing her away. 5 years of believing, hoping, praying that she was better off without him. That somewhere out there, she was living a happy life, free from the darkness that followed him like a shadow. He'd been so sure, so certain that he'd saved her by destroying her heart, that the cruelty had been kindness in disguise. But he was wrong. She hadn't left empty-handed like he thought. She hadn't walked away with just broken dreams and a shattered heart. No, she'd left carrying something infinitely more precious. She'd left carrying his entire world inside her. 2 tiny lives, his children, his blood, his legacy. And he never knew. For 5 years, he'd had children. For 5 years, he'd been a father. And he'd missed everything. Their first breath, their first cry, their first steps, their first words, every milestone, every moment. Gone, lost forever. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his legs suddenly weak. The great Kang Min-jun, the man who'd faced down rival gangs and corrupt politicians, and assassination attempts without flinching, felt his knees buckle. He caught himself on the edge of his desk, gripping it so hard his knuckles turned white. His breathing came in sharp, painful gasps, his vision blurred. And for the first time in his adult life, Kang Min-jun felt something he'd forgotten existed. Fear, not fear for himself. He'd stopped fearing for his own life years ago. No, this was different. This was the terror of knowing that somewhere out there, he had 2 5-year-old children who didn't know he existed. 2 pieces of his soul walking around in the world, completely vulnerable, completely unprotected by him. And worse than that, the crushing, suffocating knowledge that he'd driven away the only woman he'd ever loved, that she'd been pregnant with his children, when he'd looked her in the eye and told her she meant nothing, that she'd carried that pain, that betrayal while carrying his babies. What had he done? The question echoed in his mind like a death sentence. What had he done? His eyes fell to the DNA report on the floor. Next to it, barely visible, was a small photograph that must have been in the envelope. He hadn't even noticed it before. With shaking hands, he bent down and picked it up. 2 children stared back at him from the photo. A boy and a girl. 5 years old, the report had said. They were beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. The boy had his eyes. There was no mistaking it. Those same dark, serious eyes that Min-jun saw every time he looked in the mirror. The same strong jawline, even at such a young age. The girl had Yuri's smile, that warm, bright smile that used to light up his entire world. Her face shape, her expressions, all Yuri, but they both had something else, something that made his chest tight and his eyes burn. They had this look of innocence, of happiness, of being loved. They looked nothing like him, and that destroyed him more than anything else, because he knew what he was. He was darkness, violence, cold calculation. He was everything wrong with the world. And these children, his children, they looked pure, untouched by the ugliness he carried with him everywhere. Yuri had done that. She'd kept them safe, kept them away from him, from his world, from everything that would have destroyed their innocence. She'd protected them from him, and he couldn't even be angry about it, because she was right. She was so right. What kind of life could he have given them? What kind of father would he have been? The kind who taught them how to hurt people, how to lie and cheat and kill to survive? The kind whose enemies would have used them as weapons against him? No, she'd save them, just like he'd thought he was saving her 5 years ago. The irony was not lost on him. Min-jun sank into his chair, still holding the photograph. His empire, his power, his reputation, his money, none of it meant anything in this moment. He would trade it all, every last piece of it, just to go back, just to do things differently, just to have been there. But he couldn't go back. Time was the one enemy even Kang Min-jun couldn't defeat. The question now was simple, even if the answer was impossibly complicated. What was he going to do? Did he have any right to walk into their lives after 5 years? Did he have any right to disrupt whatever peace Yuri had built for them? And the biggest question of all, the one that terrified him more than any bullet or blade ever had, would they want him? Would Yuri ever forgive him? Would his children ever call him father? Or had he destroyed that chance 5 years ago when he'd looked into Yuri's eyes and broken her heart to save her life? He didn't know, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had to find them. He had to see them. He had to know they were safe. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to make things right, even if it took the rest of his life, even if they never forgave him. Even if all he could do was watch them from the shadows, the way he'd watched Yuri leave Seoul 5 years ago. Kang Min-jun picked up his phone with trembling hands and made a call. "Find her," he said, his voice raw and broken. "Find Song Yuri. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. Find her and find my children." He ended the call and looked down at the photograph again. At the two beautiful faces that were half him and half the woman he'd loved and lost. "I'm coming," he whispered to the photo, his voice cracking. "I don't know if you'll want me. I don't know if I deserve you, but I'm coming. And this time, I won't fail you." The mighty Kang Min-jun, the king of Seoul's underworld, sat alone in his penthouse surrounded by all his wealth and power, holding a photograph of the only things in the world that truly mattered. And for the first time in 5 years, he let himself feel the weight of what he'd lost. It nearly crushed him. Hello, dear viewers. I know your mind is probably racing with questions right now. How did this happen? How did the most powerful mafia king in all of Korea end up in this situation? How could a man who controls everything lose track of his own children for 5 whole years? What really happened between Min-jun and Yuri? Trust me, this story runs deeper than you imagine. Every twist, every heartbreak, you're about to see it all, but first, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Are you Team Min-jun or Team Yuri? Does he deserve a second chance after what he did? Well, we shall see. Now, hit that like button and share this with someone who loves a romance they'll never see coming. And subscribe if you haven't. We've got more stories like this that'll keep you up at night. With that out of the way, I believe you are ready? Because we're going back. Back to where it all started. Back to the moment two people who should never have met changed each other's lives forever. The story of how Kang Min-jun lost everything actually began 5 years earlier, on a day that seemed perfectly ordinary. A day when Song Yuri walked into his company with hope in her heart and dreams in her eyes. A day when neither of them knew that their meeting would change both their lives forever. It was a typical Seoul morning. The city was alive with the rush of people heading to work, the streets packed with cars, the air filled with the endless energy that made Seoul one of the greatest cities in the world. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, a young woman named Song Yuri was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She was about to fall in love with Kang Min-jun. Yuri stood outside the massive glass building that housed LK Corporation, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. This was it. Her fresh start. Her new beginning. She'd just landed a job as an executive translator for one of the biggest companies in Seoul. The pay was excellent. The benefits were amazing. The opportunity was everything she'd worked for. She smoothed down her navy pencil skirt and adjusted the collar of her white silk blouse. First impressions mattered. She wanted to look professional, capable, confident, even if inside her stomach was doing nervous flips. Yuri had no idea that she wasn't walking into a normal company. She didn't know that LK Corporation was just the legitimate face of something much darker. She didn't know that the CEO she was about to meet wasn't just a successful businessman. She didn't know that she was walking straight into a trap, even though no one had set one for her. Sometimes, fate is the cruelest trap of all. She walked through the impressive lobby with its marble floors and modern art, checked in with security, and took the elevator up to the executive floor. With each floor that passed, her heart beat a little faster. Nervous excitement mixed with pure anxiety. She was 27 years old, talented, hardworking, and ready to prove herself. She had no idea her whole life was about to change. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and she stepped out onto a floor that screamed wealth and power. Everything was sleek, modern, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Seoul skyline stretching out in all directions. The air even smelled expensive, like leather and expensive cologne and money. A receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Miss Song Yuri?" "Yes, that's me," Yuri replied, returning the smile. "Welcome to LK Corporation. Mr. Kang is expecting you. His office is at the end of the hall. You can go right in." Yuri nodded, clutching her tablet and portfolio a little tighter. This was it. Time to meet her new boss. She walked down the hallway, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She passed several offices, noticing that the building seemed quieter than she expected. More controlled, like everyone here moved with purpose and caution. She should have paid attention to that. Should have noticed the way people watched her as she passed. Should have seen the security cameras that tracked her every move. Should have felt the weight of eyes following her. But she didn't. She was too focused on making a good impression. Too focused on her new future. Too focused on everything except the warning signs that were everywhere. She reached the massive double doors at the end of the hallway, took one more deep breath, straightened her shoulders, knocked twice. "Come in," came a voice from inside. Deep, commanding, the kind of voice that made you want to obey without question. Yuri opened the door and stepped inside, and that's when she saw him for the first time. Kang Min-jun, the man who would become her everything and then destroy her. The man who would give her the greatest gifts of her life and then take himself away. The man who would love her so much that he'd break her heart to save her. But she didn't know any of that yet. All she knew in that moment was that her new boss was the most intimidating man she'd ever seen. The office was massive, probably bigger than her entire apartment. One entire wall was just windows, giving a breathtaking view of Seoul that made you feel like you were on top of the world. The furniture was all black and white, minimalist, but clearly expensive. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly clean, perfectly controlled, just like the man sitting behind the enormous desk. Kang Min-jun didn't look up immediately. He was focused on signing documents, his pen moving across paper with precise, controlled movements. He was wearing a black three-piece suit that probably cost more than Yuri made in 3 months. His black hair was styled back perfectly, not a single strand out of place. Even sitting down, you could tell he was tall, powerfully built. But it wasn't his appearance that made Yuri's breath catch in her throat. It was the aura around him, the presence, the way the air itself seemed heavier. In his vicinity, this wasn't just a successful CEO. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. She stood there, frozen, not sure if she should speak or wait. Her professional training told her to wait until acknowledged, but the silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then suddenly, his pen stopped moving. It just stopped. Mid-signature, like he'd sensed something, felt something change in the room. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his head and looked at her. And Yuri forgot how to breathe. His eyes were the darkest she'd ever seen. Almost black, sharp, intelligent. The kind of eyes that saw everything, missed nothing, and forgot even less. They locked onto her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her, reading every thought, every fear, every secret she'd ever kept. For a moment, that felt like an eternity. Neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other. And something passed between them. Something neither could name. Something that felt like recognition, even though they'd never met. Like two pieces of a puzzle that suddenly realized they fit together, even though they'd never wanted to be part of the same picture. It terrified them both, though neither would admit it. Min-jun was the first to break the silence. "You're the new translator." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. His voice was low, controlled, every word measured and weighted. Yuri found her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "Yes, sir. Song Yuri, it's an honor to... Do you always interrupt?" The words were like ice water, sharp, cutting. Yuri's mouth snapped shut so fast her teeth clicked. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She'd barely said 3 words, and she'd already messed up. She'd been so nervous, so eager to make a good impression, that she'd started babbling before he'd even finished speaking. Stupid. So stupid. She stood there, feeling about 2 inches tall, wanting the expensive marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. Min-jun watched her for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with movements that seemed almost predatory in their grace, he stood up. And up. And up. God, he was tall, 6'2" at least. Broad shoulders that filled out that expensive suit perfectly. He moved around the desk with the kind of controlled power that made you think of dangerous animals, lions, tigers, things that were beautiful to look at but could kill you before you even realized you were in danger. He stopped about 3 feet away from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin slightly. Close enough to be intimidating without being inappropriate. And Min-jun knew exactly what he was doing. He'd perfected this dance years ago. How to use his presence, his size, his reputation to put people off balance, to establish dominance without saying a word. To make people remember who held the power in any room he entered. What he didn't expect was the way his heart had stuttered when she'd walked through that door. The way something in his chest had tightened when their eyes met. The way every instinct in his body was screaming at him that this woman was dangerous. Not to his life, to something worse, to his control. "I'm Kang Min-jun," he said, his voice quieter now but no less commanding. "Your boss, you work for me now?" Yuri nodded, not trusting her voice yet. His eyes never left hers. "Everything you see here stays here. Everything you hear, you forget. Understand?" There was something in the way he said it. Not a threat, exactly, more like a warning. Like he was trying to protect her from something without being able to tell her what. "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. For another heartbeat, they stood there, too close. The air between them felt charged, electric, like right before a lightning strike. Yuri's hands were trembling slightly. She clasped them together, hoping he wouldn't notice. He noticed. Kang Min-jun noticed everything, but he didn't comment. Instead, he turned and walked back to his desk, putting distance between them. Safe distance, professional distance, the kind of distance that said, "You are an employee and nothing more." "You start tomorrow," he said, already looking back at his documents, dismissing her. "Don't be late." "Yes, sir." Yuri turned to leave, grateful to escape the suffocating intensity of his presence. Her hand was on the door handle when his voice stopped her. "Song Yuri." She turned back, her heart jumping into her throat. His expression had changed, just slightly. The ice had cracked, just for a fraction of a second. She saw something underneath, something human, something almost vulnerable. But then it was gone so fast she wondered if she'd imagined it. "Welcome to LK Corporation," he said, and his voice was different too. Softer, almost warm. "Thank you, sir," she replied, confused by the sudden shift. She left quickly, closing the door behind her, leaned against it for just a moment, trying to catch her breath. What was that? What had just happened in there? She had no idea that on the other side of that door, Kang Min-jun was having the exact same thought. He sat at his desk, staring at the document in front of him without seeing it. His mind was replaying every second of that meeting. The way she'd looked when she walked in, nervous but brave. The way her eyes had widened when she saw him. The way she'd blushed when he'd corrected her. The way she'd stood her ground even though she was clearly terrified. And that smile. God, that smile when he'd welcomed her. It had lit up her entire face, made her beautiful eyes sparkle, made something in his chest ache in a way he didn't understand and didn't like. This was a problem. He didn't do complications, didn't do attachments, didn't do anything that could be used against him. And this woman, Song Yuri, had complication written all over her. He should fire her. Right now. Before whatever this was had a chance to become something. But he didn't. He told himself it was because finding a qualified translator would be a hassle, that it would raise questions, that it would be unprofessional to fire someone on their first day before they'd even started. He told himself a lot of lies that day. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. He wanted to see her again, and Kang Min-jun always got what he wanted, even when he shouldn't. 3 months passed like water through fingers. Fast. Inevitable. Impossible to hold on to. In those 3 months, everything changed, and nothing changed. On the surface, everything was professional. Yuri was an excellent translator, efficient, accurate, hardworking. She showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. She was exactly what LK Corporation needed. And Min-jun was exactly what he'd always been. Cold, distant, demanding. He ran his company and his empire with the same iron fist he always had, made the same ruthless decisions, showed the same lack of mercy to anyone who crossed him. But underneath the surface, something was growing, something neither of them wanted to acknowledge, something that started small and quiet and grew louder with every passing day. It started with work. It always starts with work, doesn't it? Late nights at the office became routine. Min-jun often worked until midnight or later, handling both his legitimate business and his less legitimate enterprises. And Yuri, dedicated and eager to prove herself, stayed just as late. At first, their interactions were purely professional. He'd call her into his office to translate documents. She'd do it efficiently and leave. No small talk, no personal questions, just work. But late nights have a way of breaking down walls. It started with coffee. One night, around 11 p.m., Min-jun walked past her desk and saw her struggling to stay awake over a particularly difficult translation. Her eyes kept drooping. She'd blink hard, shake her head, and force herself to focus again. He stopped, watched her for a moment, felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. She shouldn't have to work this hard. She shouldn't be here this late. But then again, neither should he. You drink coffee? His voice made her jump. She hadn't heard him approach. Yes, sir, she said, blinking up at him. How do you take it? She looked confused by the question. Sir? Your coffee, how do you take it? Just a little milk, no sugar. He nodded and walked away. 10 minutes later, he came back and placed a cup of coffee on her desk. Made exactly how she liked it. Then he walked away without a word, carrying his own cup back to his office. Yuri stared at the coffee like it might be poisoned. Her terrifying boss had just made her coffee. With his own hands, the infamous Kang Min-jun, the man who made grown men cry, had walked to the break room and prepared her a drink. What alternate universe had she just stepped into? She picked up the cup carefully, sniffed it, just to be safe, and took a sip. It was perfect. And that's how it started, with coffee at midnight. The next night, she was working late again. This time, she made coffee for both of them and left a cup on his desk. Didn't say anything, just left it there and went back to her work. When Min-jun found it, still hot, made exactly how he liked it, black, strong, no sugar, something in his carefully constructed walls cracked a little wider. Coffee became their unspoken language, a small gesture that said, "I see you. I know you're working hard. You're not alone here." Then coffee led to conversation. It happened gradually, organically. One night, he walked past her desk, and instead of just leaving her coffee, he said, "You're working on the Nakamura contract?" "Yes, sir. The terminology is challenging." Nakamura is particular about language. He'll reject the whole deal if one word feels off to him. "That's stressful. That's business." He paused. "Let me see it." And just like that, they were working together. He pulled up a chair, sat next to her, went through the translation line by line, explaining the nuances, the hidden meanings, what Nakamura would and wouldn't accept. Yuri was surprised by how good a teacher he was. Patient, clear. He never made her feel stupid for asking questions. And when she suggested a clever solution to a particularly tricky phrase, he actually looked impressed. "That's actually perfect," he said, something almost like pride in his voice. "Where did you learn to think like that?" She smiled. "My professor always said translation isn't just about words, it's about intention. What's the speaker trying to make the listener feel?" "Smart man, your professor." "She," Yuri corrected gently. "Smart woman," Min-jun's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Smart woman," he agreed. And that was the night he stopped being just her terrifying boss. That was the night he became human. After that, the late nights became less about work and more about each other. Oh, they still worked. They were both too professional not to. But the conversation stretched longer. The silences became comfortable instead of tense. They learned things about each other in the quiet hours when the rest of the city slept. Yuri learned that Min-jun took his coffee black because his father used to say sugar was for weak men. That he'd built LK Corporation from near bankruptcy after his father died. That he never took vacations because he didn't know what to do with free time. That he played piano but hadn't touched one in years. That he had a younger sister in college who didn't know anything about his real business. That he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders and never let anyone help him carry it. Min-jun learned that Yuri grew up in Busan with her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. That she'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through university. That she loved old movies and bookstores and rainy days. That she believed in goodness even though life had given her plenty of reasons not to. That her smile was the most genuine thing he'd ever seen. That when she laughed, really laughed, it sounded like music. That she was stronger than she looked and braver than she knew, and that he was falling for her. God help him, he was falling for her. He fought it hard, reminded himself every day why this was dangerous, why he couldn't afford attachments, why someone like her deserved better than someone like him. Made lists in his head of all the reasons to keep his distance. But then she'd laugh at something he said, or bring him coffee without being asked, or look at him with those warm eyes that saw good in him that didn't exist, and all his carefully constructed defenses would crumble. 6 weeks after she'd started working for him, Kang Min-jun accepted the truth he'd been denying. He was in love with Song Yuri, and it was going to destroy them both. The night everything changed started innocently enough. It was almost midnight and Yuri was still at her desk, working on a particularly tedious translation. Her eyes were burning from staring at the computer screen for too long. Her neck ached, her back hurt, but she was almost done and she was determined to finish before going home. "Still here?" She jumped, pressing a hand to her racing heart. Min-jun stood in the doorway of his office, jacket gone, tie loosened, the top button of his white shirt undone. His hair was slightly messed up from running his hands through it, something he did when he was tired or stressed. He looked human, approachable, almost soft in the dim office lighting. Dangerous. So dangerous. You scared me, she said, laughing a little. You should go home, Yuri. His voice was gentle, concerned. He'd started calling her Yuri instead of Miss Song a few weeks ago, and every time he said her name in that low, intimate way, it sent shivers down her spine. Almost done, she protested, gesturing at her screen. Just need to finish this. Yuri. The way he said her name this time was different. Not a boss talking to an employee. Something else. Something that made her look up and meet his eyes. He was closer now. When had he moved? He was standing right beside her desk, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, frustration, and something else. Something that made her breath catch. You worked too hard, he said softly. I learned from the best, she replied, trying to keep her tone light even though her heart was pounding. And there it was, that almost smile, the one that made him look years younger, the one that made her forget he was supposed to be intimidating. Come on, he said, I'll drive you home. You don't have to, I know. 2 words, simple, but the way he said them, like he wanted to, like it wasn't an obligation, like driving her home at midnight was something he'd choose to do even if he didn't have to. Yuri knew she should say no, knew that accepting was blurring lines that should stay sharp and clear, knew that every extra moment she spent with him was pulling her deeper into something she couldn't afford to feel. But she was tired and lonely, and more than anything, she didn't want to say goodbye yet. Okay, she heard herself say. Thank you. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief? Happiness? She couldn't tell, but he nodded, and she saved her work and grabbed her purse, and 5 minutes later they were in his car. His car was exactly what she expected. Expensive, sleek, black, a Mercedes that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. The leather seats were soft as butter. The interior smelled like his cologne. Everything about it screamed money and power. But somehow, sitting in that space with him, she felt safe, protected, like nothing bad could happen as long as she was here. They drove through Seoul's late-night streets in comfortable silence at first. The city was quieter now, the rush of daytime replaced by a softer, more intimate darkness. Rain had started falling, soft, gentle drops that pattered against the windshield and made the city lights blur into something magical. Can I ask you something? Yuri's voice was quiet, hesitant. Min-jun glanced at her, then back at the road. You just did. She laughed. Actually, laughed, and the sound filled the car like sunlight. Min-jun's hands tightened on the steering wheel, fighting the urge to pull over and just listen to her laugh for the rest of the night. Why LK Corporation? She asked. You could have done anything, been anything. Why take over your father's company? He was quiet for a long moment. This was dangerous territory. Too personal, too real. He should deflect, change the subject, put the walls back up. But he didn't. My father built it, he said finally, his voice careful. Then he died. Someone had to carry it forward. I'm sorry. Her sympathy was genuine. He could hear it in her voice. Losing a parent is... Don't be. He cut her off, his tone matter-of-fact. He was a bastard. He expected shock, maybe judgment, maybe her to drop the subject entirely. Instead, she said softly, but you still honor him, by running his company, by building it into something greater than he ever did. That says more about you than it does about him. Min-jun's hands tightened on the wheel. How did she do that? How did she see past all his defenses and straight into the parts of himself he didn't even acknowledge? How did she find light in the darkness he'd wrapped around himself like armor? He glanced at her, really looked at her. In the dim light from passing street lamps, she looked almost ethereal, beautiful, kind, everything he wasn't and never could be. You see too much, he said, and it came out almost like a warning, almost like he was scared. Maybe you hide too much, she replied gently. No judgment, no accusation, just understanding. The car came to a stop. Her apartment building. Modest. Clean. Nothing like the luxury he was used to, but it suited her somehow. Honest. Unpretentious. Real. Neither of them moved. The rain was heavier now, drumming on the roof of the car, creating a cocoon of sound around them. "Thank you," Yuri said softly, "for the ride." Yuri, her name came out rougher than he intended. More weighted, she turned to face him fully, in the close confines of the car. She was so near. Close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her brown eyes. Close enough that he could smell her perfume, something soft and floral that was driving him slowly insane. Close enough to touch. Too close. Not close enough. "Be careful around me," he said, and his voice was serious, almost pleading. She looked confused. "Why?" "Because I'm not a good man, Yuri." He needed her to understand this, needed her to see what he was. "I'm not who you think I am." She should have been scared, should have run, should have thanked him for the ride and disappeared into her building and never looked back. Instead, she smiled. That warm, genuine smile that destroyed him every time. "I don't believe that," she said with such certainty it made his chest ache. And in that moment, something in Kang Min-jun broke. Or maybe something healed. He couldn't tell which anymore. Couldn't tell if she was his salvation or his damnation. Maybe she was both. "Good night, Min-jun," she said, using his given name for the first time. Not Sir, not Mr. Kang, just his name. Intimate, personal, like they were equals, like she saw past the power and the money and the reputation to just him. "Good night, Yuri." She got out of the car and ran through the rain to her building. Before going inside, she turned back and waved. He waved back, watching until she was safely inside. Then he sat there in his car, in the rain, in the dark, and admitted what he'd been denying for weeks. He was in love with her, completely, hopelessly, dangerously in love with her, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next 6 weeks were the happiest of Kang Min-jun's life. They were also the most terrifying, because for the first time in his adult life, he had something to lose. Someone who mattered more than his empire. Someone whose smile was worth more than all his power. He and Yuri didn't define what they were. They didn't have the conversation, didn't put labels on it, but it was there, undeniable, growing stronger with every stolen moment. He started driving her home every night. Those car rides became the highlight of his day. 20 minutes where it was just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing, where he could be just Min-jun, not the feared mafia king. They started having lunch together, always somewhere quiet, away from the office. Small restaurants where nobody knew who he was, where they could sit across from each other and talk and laugh and just be. He showed her Seoul at night, the Seoul tourists never saw. Quiet rooftop bars with views of the entire city. The Han River at 3 a.m. when the world was silent. Hidden bookstores that stayed open late. Places that were his secrets that he'd never shared with anyone. And she showed him what it felt like to be human again. To laugh. To enjoy small things. To care about someone more than you cared about power. She reminded him what warmth felt like after years of cold. What light felt like after living in darkness. They never crossed the final line, never kissed, never held hands in public, never made it official, but it was more intimate than any physical relationship Min-jun had ever had. This was emotional, raw, real, and it scared him to death. Because in his world, love was a weapon. Caring about someone was handing your enemies a knife and showing them exactly where to stab you. He knew this, had seen it happen, had used it against others. But he couldn't stop, couldn't walk away, couldn't give her up. He told himself he'd be careful, that he'd protect her, that no one would ever find out, that he could have this one thing, this one person, and keep her safe. He was wrong. He'd always been wrong. And his enemies were watching, waiting, learning his weakness, learning her name. The envelope arrived at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Min-jun was in his private office, the real one, not the corporate one. The office where he handled his darker business, where he made decisions about territory and rivals and problems that needed to be eliminated. He was alone. He was always alone in this office. That was the rule. The envelope was slipped under his door, just slid through, silent, like a snake. He stared at it for a long moment. In his world, unexpected deliveries in the middle of the night meant bad news, meant someone was sending a message, meant trouble was here. He picked it up slowly, felt the weight of it. There was something inside besides paper. He opened it carefully. Photographs spilled onto his desk, dozens of them, and every single one was of Yuri. His blood turned to ice. His heart stopped. Everything stopped. Yuri leaving her apartment in the morning. Yuri at the coffee shop on the corner. Yuri walking into LK Corporation. Yuri laughing. Yuri smiling. Yuri getting into his car. Yuri everywhere. Every moment. Every day. They'd been following her, watching her, tracking her every movement. And he hadn't known. Each photograph had a red circle drawn around her face. Some had crosshairs, precision drawn, markings of a sniper, markings of someone planning a hit. His hands started shaking. Kang Min-jun's hands never shook, but they were shaking now, trembling so badly the photographs fluttered in his grip. His phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. He picked it up with shaking fingers. One text message. Simple. Devastating. Your weakness has a name. How long before she has a grave? The phone shattered against the wall before he even realized he'd thrown it. Glass and plastic exploded. But he couldn't hear it, couldn't hear anything over the roaring in his ears. This couldn't be happening. Not her. Anyone but her. He'd been so careful, so discreet. They'd never kissed in public, never held hands, never been seen together except as boss and employee. He'd thought he was protecting her, thought he was being smart, but his enemies were smarter. They always were. They'd been watching, waiting, and they'd seen what he'd tried so hard to hide. They knew she mattered, and now she was a target because of him, because he'd been selfish, because he'd wanted something beautiful in his ugly world and hadn't thought about the cost, because he'd loved her, and love in his world was a death sentence. The door opened. Min-jun's hand went to the gun in his desk drawer automatically, but he stopped when he saw who it was. Park Jin-ho, his underboss, the man who'd raised him after his father died, the closest thing to a father he'd had in 20 years. Jin-ho closed the door quietly behind him. His face was grave. He'd already heard. Of course he had. Jin-ho heard everything. I warned you, Jin-ho said. No anger in his voice, just sadness. Disappointment. No attachments, no weaknesses. I'll kill them, Min-jun said, and his voice was deadly. Absolute. Every single one of them. I'll hunt down whoever sent this, and I'll make them beg for death. And while you're hunting them, Jin-ho said calmly, walking further into the room, who's protecting her? The words hit like a physical blow. Min-jun's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Jin-ho picked up one of the photographs, studied it. Yuri laughing at something, completely unaware she was being watched, completely innocent, completely vulnerable. You have two choices, Min-jun. Jin-ho's voice was serious, paternal, the voice of a man who had had to make impossible decisions himself. And neither of them is easy. Min-jun said nothing, just waited, already knowing, already feeling his heart breaking before the words were even spoken. Choice one, Jin-ho continued. You keep her close, guard her every second of every day. Never let her out of your sight. Put a detail on her 24/7. Turn her life into a prison. Watch her slowly realize what you really are. Watch her happiness die. Watch her look at you with fear instead of that warmth you love so much. Watch her hate you for the cage you've built around her. And pray that it's enough. Pray that your enemies don't find a moment when your guard is down and put a bullet in her head just to hurt you. Each word was a knife. Each scenario a nightmare. Min-jun could see it so clearly. Yuri, trapped, scared, looking at him like he was a monster. Because he was. Because keeping her would turn him into the very thing she'd somehow believed he wasn't. Or, Jinho said, and his voice was even softer now, almost gentle. Choice 2. Min-jun closed his eyes, already knowing, already breaking. Make her leave, Jinho said. Make her hate you so completely, so thoroughly, that she runs and never looks back. Break her heart. Destroy whatever she feels for you. Make sure she wants nothing to do with you. She'll be hurt, devastated. It will destroy her for a while, but she'll heal. And more importantly, she'll be alive. She'll be safe. Because dead women don't interest our enemies. Only the women we love are useful weapons. The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. There has to be another way, Min-jun said, but his voice was hollow. He already knew the truth. There isn't, Jinho said with finality. Not in this life. You chose this world before you ever met her. You can't have both. You can't have love and power. You can't have her and this empire. One will kill the other, and if you're not careful, both will end up dead. Min-jun looked down at the photographs again, spread across his desk like accusations, like warnings, like prophecies of a future he couldn't bear to imagine. Yuri, beautiful Yuri, warm, kind, genuine Yuri, who saw good in him that didn't exist, who made him believe he could be better than what he was, who'd become the light in his darkness, and that light was going to get her killed. Because monsters don't get happy endings. Monsters don't get to keep beautiful things. Monsters destroy everything they touch. He'd been a fool to think he could be different. How? His voice cracked on the word. How do I make her leave? Jinho looked at him with something like pity. You know how, Min-jun. You know exactly how. You do what you do best. Min-jun looked up, not understanding. You destroy her, Jinho said simply. Brutally, completely, thoroughly. You make her believe everything you had was a lie. Every moment, every laugh, every look. You make her think she was nothing to you, just entertainment, a distraction. You break her so badly that she runs and never wants to see you again. I can't. The words came out broken, desperate, unlike him. I can't do that to her. You have to. Jinho's voice was firm. Because if you don't, one day, very soon, I'm going to get a call telling me they found her body, and you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing you killed her. Not with your own hands, but with your love. Is that what you want? No. God, no. The thought of Yuri dead, those warm eyes closed forever, that bright smile gone from the world, it was worse than any torture. Worse than any nightmare, worse than death itself. How long do I have? Min-jun asked, already planning? Already dying inside. The sooner the better. They're watching her now, waiting to see what you'll do. If they see you protecting her, guarding her, they'll know for certain. They'll strike. But if they see you discard her, Jinho paused. If they see she means nothing to you, they'll lose interest. Move on to finding your real weakness, and she'll just be another employee who quit. Safe. Forgotten. Forgotten. The word tasted like ash. Min-jun looked at the photographs one more time, memorizing, burning them into his brain, because after tomorrow, he couldn't allow himself to look at her this way anymore. Couldn't allow himself to feel this way anymore. Tomorrow, he would destroy the only good thing in his life. To save it. The cruelty of it was almost poetic. I need someone, he said, his voice flat now. Emotionless, already shutting down, already becoming the cold king he needed to be. A woman, Someone who can play a part. Jin-ho nodded. He'd expected this. I know someone. Discreet. Professional. She'll do what you need. Set it up. Tomorrow night. Suite at the peninsula. Make sure Yuri sees everything. Min-jun, just do it. His voice was sharp now. Final. The voice of the Mafia king who never explained himself. And Jin-ho? Yes? After this, after she leaves, I don't want to hear her name again. Ever. Don't tell me where she goes. Don't tell me if she's okay. Don't tell me anything. I need to believe she's fine. I need to believe I saved her. Because if I know the truth... His voice broke slightly. If I know the truth, I won't survive it. Jin-ho nodded slowly. Understanding. It will be done. He left, closing the door softly behind him. And Kang Min-jun sat alone in his office, surrounded by photographs of the woman he loved, planning how to break her heart so completely that she'd never come back. It was the most merciful thing he'd ever done. It was the cruelest thing he'd ever done. It was the only thing he could do. Tomorrow, he would destroy her. Tonight, just for tonight, he let himself break. He picked up one photograph. Yuri, laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from every part of her. He'd taken this picture himself on his phone a few weeks ago. She'd said something funny and he'd captured it without thinking. He pressed the photograph to his chest and closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty room. To her, to himself, to the universe that had given him this gift just to tear it away. I'm so sorry, Yuri. I love you. That's why I have to do this. Please, please forgive me, even though you never will, even though you'll hate me. Please know that everything was real. Every moment, every laugh, every look. I loved you. God help me, I loved you so much. His voice cracked, broke, and for the first time since he was 8 years old, watching his mother walk away without looking back, Kang Min-jun cried. Tomorrow he would be the monster she needed him to be. But tonight, just for tonight, he let himself be the man who loved her. The man who was about to die, even if his body kept breathing. The next day passed in a blur. Min-jun moved through it like a ghost, signed documents without reading them, attended meetings without hearing a word, made decisions on autopilot while his mind was somewhere else entirely, planning how to destroy the woman he loved. He'd sent Yuri a text in the morning. Simple, casual, nothing that would make her suspicious. Dinner tonight? I have a surprise for you. She'd responded within seconds, and that speed, that eagerness made his chest hurt. Really? Yes. What's the occasion? You'll see. Meet me at the Peninsula Hotel, 9 p.m., room 1705. A hotel room? Min-jun, what are you planning? He could picture her blushing as she typed that, could imagine the shy smile on her face, the hope in her eyes. She probably thought he was finally going to make their relationship official. Finally, going to say the words they'd both been dancing around for weeks. She had no idea she was walking into an execution. Trust me, you'll like it. I trust you. See you tonight. That little heart emoji, so innocent, so full of affection. It felt like a knife in his gut. Min-jun stared at his phone for a long time after that exchange, memorizing her words, the way she typed, the emojis she used, everything, because after tonight he was deleting everything, every text, every photo, every trace of her. He had to. It was the only way he'd survive this. At 7 p.m., Min-jun arrived at the Peninsula Hotel, Suite 1705. Luxury accommodated that cost more per night than most people made in a month. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Seoul that made you feel like you owned the world. Expensive furniture, soft lighting, everything perfect, everything staged. The woman arrived 30 minutes later. SEO yawn, late 20s. Beautiful in that calculated way that came from expensive cosmetics and designer clothes. An actress, Jin-ho had said. One who specialized in discreet assignments for people who needed someone to play a part. She looked at the suite with professional appreciation. Nice setup. What's the role? My girlfriend, Min-jun said flatly. Intimate, comfortable, like we've been together for a while. Seo-yeon nodded, already slipping into character. She draped her coat over a chair, poured 2 glasses of champagne, settled onto the couch with practiced ease. How long do I need to play this? 10 minutes, maybe less. Just long enough for her to see and believe. And the story, if she asks? She won't get close enough to ask. But if she does, we've been seeing each other for months. Serious. You know about her because I told you. She's just an employee who's been persistent. The words tasted like poison, reducing Yuri to nothing, to an annoyance, to something disposable. Seo-yeon raised an eyebrow. You're really going to break this girl's heart, aren't you? That's what I'm paying you for, Min-jun said coldly. Can you do the job or not? Oh, I can do it. I'm just saying, whoever she is, she must mean something to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to destroy her this thoroughly. Min-jun's jaw tightened. That's none of your concern. Fair enough. Seo-yeon sipped her champagne. So when does our guest of honor arrive? Min-jun checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. 15 minutes. Then let's set the scene, shall we? Yuri stood in front of her closet, changing outfits for the 3rd time. She wanted to look perfect. Not too formal, not too casual, just right. She finally settled on a simple dress. Navy blue, elegant but understated. She let her hair down, applied a touch of makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her heart was racing. Min-jun had a surprise for her. At a hotel. She wasn't naive. She knew what that probably meant. They were finally going to cross that line. Finally going to make this real. She'd been ready for weeks. More than ready. She was in love with him. Completely. Terrifyingly in love. And she was almost certain he felt the same way, even if neither of them had said it out loud yet. Tonight might be the night. She grabbed the small gift bag she'd been hiding in her closet. A watch. Expensive. She'd been saving for 3 months. His birthday was tomorrow, and she wanted to give him something meaningful. Something that said what she hadn't been brave enough to say with words. She'd had it engraved. To the man who taught me what home feels like. Why? Too much? Maybe, but it was true. He'd become her home, her safe place, the person she thought about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. She checked the time. 8:50 p.m., she should head out. The drive to the Peninsula Hotel took 20 minutes. The whole way there, her heart was doing acrobatics in her chest. Excitement, nervousness, hope, all mixed together in a cocktail of emotions that made her feel dizzy and alive. She walked through the lobby, feeling out of place in this space of obvious wealth and luxury. The Peninsula was where celebrities stayed, where chaebols hosted private parties, not where girls like her typically found themselves. But Min-jun had invited her here. He wanted to share this space with her. That had to mean something, right? The elevator ride to the 17th floor felt endless. She checked her reflection in the mirrored walls, fixed her hair, reapplied her lipstick, took a deep breath. This was it. Floor 17. The elevator doors opened. Room 1705 was at the end of the hall. She walked slowly, clutching her gift bag, trying to calm her racing heart. The door was slightly ajar, unlocked, like he was expecting her, like he wanted her to just walk in. So she did. She pushed the door open, a smile already forming on her lips. Min-jun? I'm here. You said you had a... The words died in her throat. The world stopped spinning. Time itself seemed to freeze. Because there, on the couch in the beautiful suite with its romantic lighting and champagne and roses, was Min-jun. And he wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him. Beautiful, elegant. Her hand was on his chest. Intimate, comfortable, familiar. They were sitting close. Too close. And there was champagne. 2 glasses. Soft music playing. Candles lit. It looked like a date. It looked like romance. It looked like her whole world shattering into a million pieces. The gift bag slipped from Yuri's fingers. She heard it hit the floor but couldn't feel it. Couldn't feel anything except the ice spreading through her chest. The inability to breathe. The way her vision was blurring. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Min-jun? Her voice came out small, broken, like a child who didn't understand why they were being hurt. He stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. His face was blank. Not guilty, not sorry, not panicked like someone who'd been caught cheating. Just empty. Cold, like she was a stranger, like she was nothing. That's when she knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. Yuri. He said her name like it was a business transaction. Flat. Professional. You're early. Early? Early? That's what he had to say? She was standing here looking at him with another woman, and he was commenting on her timing? What is this? She gestured weakly at the scene before her. At the woman. At the champagne. At everything that was destroying her in real time. This? Min-jun looked around as if just noticing the setup. This is Wednesday. Wednesday. Like this was routine. Like this was normal. Like she was the one being strange for being upset. The woman on the couch laughed, a soft, intimate sound that felt like nails on Yuri's heart. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and looked at Yuri with something that might have been pity. Or amusement. Yuri couldn't tell anymore. Couldn't process anything anymore. Is this the translator you mentioned? The woman asked Min-jun, her voice carrying a familiarity that spoke of private conversations, of shared secrets, of knowing each other well. She's pretty. Mentioned her. He'd mentioned her. To this woman. Which meant this woman knew about Yuri. Which meant this had been going on for a while. Which meant... Oh God. You told her about me? Yuri's voice was barely above a whisper. She was asking, but she already knew the answer. Already felt the truth of it breaking her from the inside out. I tell Seoyeon lots of things, Min-jun said casually, using the woman's name like it was natural. Like she was important. Like she mattered. We're close. Close. That word. That simple, devastating word. Close meant intimate. Close meant trust. Close meant relationship. Close meant everything Yuri thought she had with him was actually shared with someone else. Or worse, was never real at all. How long? She needed to know. Needed to understand. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding that he was about to clear up. Maybe, does it matter? His voice was dismissive, bored, even, like this. Conversation was tedious. Yes! The word exploded out of her, louder than she intended, desperate. Yes, it matters! We're what, Yuri? The way he said it, like a challenge, like he was daring her to claim something that didn't exist. And she realized, with horror, that she couldn't finish that sentence. They'd never defined it, never made it official, never said the words. She'd just assumed. Hoped. Believed. What an idiot she'd been. Did you think we were together? He said it slowly, clearly, making sure she understood each word. Exclusive? Each word was a slap, each syllable a knife. She was struggling to form words through the pain, through the shock. You said I was different. Special. She'd clung to those words, those precious moments when he'd looked at her like she meant something. When he'd smiled, when he'd driven her home, when he'd made her coffee, when he'd shared pieces of himself he claimed to never share. Had it all been lies? You are different, Min-jun said, and for just a second, she felt hope bloom in her chest. But then he continued, You're an excellent translator, very professional. Your work is top tier. And just like that, the hope died. He'd reduced her to her job, to her function, to a useful employee, nothing more. All those late nights, all those conversations, all those moments when she'd felt seen and known and cherished. All of it was just... What? Her being good at her job? The air left her lungs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning. "You were a distraction," he continued, his voice so cold it burned. "A pleasant one. But I'm bored now." Bored. 6 weeks of her falling in love. 6 weeks of late nights and long drives and coffee at midnight and laughter and warmth and hope. 6 weeks of her building dreams and imagining futures and believing in something real. And he was bored. "You're lying," she said it desperately, needing it to be true. "You're lying to me. I don't know why, but you're lying." For just a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pain, almost like regret. But it was gone so fast she might have imagined it. "Am I?" He raised an eyebrow, that same expression he used in business meetings when someone was being ridiculous. He turned to Seo-yeon, and then, right in front of Yuri, he touched the other woman's face. Gentle, tender, the exact way he used to touch Yuri's face on those rare moments when they were alone, and he let his guard down. It was fake. All performance. Seo-yeon was playing a role. Min-jun was destroying the woman he loved to save her life. But Yuri didn't know that. All Yuri saw was the man she loved being tender with someone else. All she felt was her heart being ripped out of her chest. "Did you actually think I could love someone like you?" His words were quiet, but they landed like bombs, each one destroying a piece of her soul. Someone like her. What did that mean? Someone too ordinary? Too poor? Too naive? Too stupid to see what was right in front of her face? "You're just the help, Yuri. The final blow. The killing strike. Know your place. The help. After everything. After all those moments. After every conversation and laugh and shared secret. After she'd opened her heart and let him in and trusted him with the broken pieces of herself. She was just the help. Something inside her shattered. Not broke. Shattered. Like glass dropped from a great height. Into so many pieces it could never be put back together. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't beg him to take it back. Didn't slap him. Didn't demand explanations. She just stood there, dying inside while somehow still breathing. Still standing, still existing in a world that had just become unbearable. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, empty, dead. "I quit." 2 words, simple, final. Min-jun's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice stayed cold. Understood. Effective immediately. She was amazed at how steady her voice was. How professional, like she was scheduling a meeting and not ending her entire world. "You'll have my formal resignation by morning." She turned to leave, to escape, to run before she completely fell apart. "Yuri," his voice stopped her. She turned back, and in that moment, she hated herself for the hope that flared in her chest. That stupid, desperate hope that he'd take it all back, that he'd say it was a mistake, that he'd tell her he loved her, that he'd be the man she thought he was instead of the monster he actually was. But he just looked at her with those cold, dead eyes. "Don't come back." 3 words, the death sentence on whatever they'd been, the final nail in the coffin of her dreams. She didn't respond, just turned and walked out of that hotel room on legs that didn't feel like they belonged to her. Down the hallway that seemed to stretch forever. Into the elevator where she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Pale, shocked, destroyed. Through the lobby where elegant people gave her curious looks. Out onto the Seoul street where the city was alive and bright and completely unaware that her world had just ended. She stood there for a moment, on the sidewalk outside the Peninsula Hotel, not sure where to go. Her apartment? She couldn't go there. It would just remind her of all the times he'd driven her home, of the way he'd waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Had that been fake too? Had he just been playing a part even then? She started walking. No destination, just movement. Anything to escape the image of him touching that woman, of him looking at her like she was nothing, of him reducing 6 weeks of her life to bored, People moved around her on the busy Seoul sidewalks, couples holding hands, friends laughing, life continuing like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Song Yuri's heart had been broken so completely, so thoroughly, that she wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. Back in the hotel room, the door had barely closed behind Yuri when Seo-yeon stood up, all pretense of warmth gone. "That was brutal," she said, her voice now businesslike and cold. "My payment?" Min-jun didn't answer, couldn't answer. He was staring at the door, at the spot where Yuri had stood, where she'd looked at him with those eyes, those warm, trusting eyes, and watched them fill with pain he'd put there. "Hey," Seo-yeon snapped her fingers. "Boss? My money?" He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, transferred an obscene amount to her account. Enough that she'd never talk about this night, enough to buy her silence forever. She checked her phone, nodded in satisfaction, grabbed her coat. "Pleasure doing business with you, though for what it's worth, that girl really loved you. Could see it all over her face." "Get out," Min-jun said, his voice hollow. Seo-yeon shrugged and left. And then Min-jun was alone in that beautiful suite with its romantic lighting and champagne and roses. All of it staged, all of it a lie, all of it set up to destroy the one real thing in his life. He saw something on the floor. The gift bag. The one Yuri had been holding when she walked in. The one that had fallen when her world shattered. He picked it up slowly. Looked inside. A watch. Expensive. She must have saved for months. She didn't make that much money. This would have been a sacrifice. His hands were trembling as he turned it over. And there, engraved on the back, were words that destroyed him completely. "To the man who taught me what home feels like." Why, home. She'd felt at home with him. The cold, violent, dangerous mafia king had made her feel safe, had made her feel like she belonged, had made her feel loved, and he'd just taken that away from her. His knees buckled. He went down hard on the expensive carpet. The watch fell from his hands and skittered across the floor. And Kang Min-jun, the king who never broke, the man who'd faced death and torture and loss without flinching, the monster who'd built an empire on blood and fear, shattered. A sound came out of him that didn't sound human. Pain and rage and grief all mixed together. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't exist in a world where he'd just done that to her. He'd saved her life. By destroying her soul, by becoming the monster she'd somehow believed he wasn't. "I'm sorry," he gasped out, even though she couldn't hear him. Even though she was probably on a street somewhere, broken and alone, hating him. "I'm so sorry, Yuri. God, I'm so sorry." But sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't take back what he'd said. Sorry didn't erase the look on her face when he'd told her she was just the help. Sorry was useless. He crawled over to where the watch had fallen, picked it up with shaking hands, held it against his chest like it could somehow connect him to her, like it could somehow make this hurt less. It didn't. Nothing would ever make this hurt less. He'd done what he had to do. Saved her life. Protected her from his world. Given her a chance at happiness away from him. But the cost was so much higher than he'd imagined. The cost was both of them.